Each Friday here on World Focus, we are going to look a bit more in depth at some of the week's top stories. We call it our roundtable discussion. Tonight we will discuss the continuing turmoil in the world's financial markets, the future of Afghanistan as the U.S. reviews its policy there, and North Korea with developments on the missile and nuclear front. What is that country up to now? Joining us tonight are Carla Robbins of the New York Times and Richard Haass, president of the Council on Foreign Relations here in New York. Carla, Richard, thank you very much for being with us.
Great.
Let's start with the calamity that's happening financially throughout the world. Already there has been discussions coming from Europe and other places that this is the end of the American era as far as dominance financially in the world. Do you agree with that, Richard?
Well, the U.S. era, in the sense that the United States totally dominated the world, was already fading before this began. But this is certainly going to reinforce that and accelerate that. Ultimately, all the United States, or any country in the world for that matter, can do rests on a foundation of the economy. The U.S. economy is weaker, less resources available. Secondly, now, we're not only vulnerable to the energy supplies of others, we import 2/3 of the oil we use, but also the currency flows. Central bank decisions, sovereign wealth fund decisions will have a tremendous impact on the availability of capital, the liquidity that essentially lubricates the American economy. Lastly, it's going to be very hard for the next president to stand up and preach to the world and say, this is how you folks ought to run your economy. Our street cred, shall we say, in that area is dramatically reduced.
I think the street cred thing is the most important thing, to be perfectly frank. I mean, if you look at what's going on right now, everyone's coming to Washington. They want to talk to the Americans about it. The Americans, luckily, finally want to talk to everybody else about it. But sort of the interconnectedness of it, the notion that somehow the United States is separate, just doesn't exist anymore. And I hope that's an important lesson if we can pull it together here. But the street cred thing is the most important thing, because we've been lecturing the whole world for a really, really long time about how to fix the economy. Nobody's going to listen to us anywhere near as seriously now.
But isn't it a bit too early to start saying we don't know how any of this is going to end up, and we certainly don't know who holds the financial high ground, so to speak, in all of this? So to say that the U.S. is really going to decline, how do we know that yet?
Well, the answer is the United States is likely to lose a degree of its power. Clearly, it's lost some of its luster. We, though, can bounce back a bit. We're a dynamic economy. We're not Japan. In 10 or 20 years, we're not going to be where we are now. But just because the U.S. declines somewhat doesn't mean someone else necessarily picks up the slack. We could be entering, indeed, I would suggest we are entering a period of history where while U.S. influence goes down, the influence of others does not necessarily go up. So we're not going to have a world where, say, China is now going to be the dominant country. We are probably going to live in a world which is going to be messier, more disorderly, less organized than the one we've come to know.
Carla, before you answer that, I'm going to move on because there's another subject, and it's about the New York Times. You reported today, or you reported this week, about this intelligence survey that's now come out about the status of things in Afghanistan. And it comes at the time that the United States is reconsidering how to handle Afghanistan. This report paints a very, very bleak picture.
More good news.
Right, thanks.
And we've heard again and again that they're reviewing policy toward Afghanistan. We've been hearing this for a really, really long time from them. What the report does say is that there is a downward spiral going on in Afghanistan. There's all this opium being produced. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda is getting increasingly strong. They don't seem to have figured out a way to stop the cross-border attacks from Pakistan, and they need more troops. They really, really need more troops. And because we are so overstretched in Iraq, there aren't enough troops there.
It was also corruption was listed highly, too, as a problem within the government.
Well, that's not a particularly shocking thing there, but there's I'm shocked to find out that there's corruption in Afghanistan. They need a policy. They need a strong policy, and they need to move quickly on Afghanistan because this thing is really going down the tubes incredibly fast. And let's not forget, this is the good war.
It's one more sign that the post-Iraq era of American foreign policy is coming to an end. I can't predict a lot, but one thing I will predict confidently is that over the next couple of years, U.S. forces in Iraq wind down, not eliminate, but come down, and U.S. forces in Afghanistan build up. This review is also timed, by the way, to David Petraeus. He's about to take over Central Command the end of October. The new commanding general of this theater needs to basically take a fresh and honest look at just how bad things are.
Well, there's been some discussion that you cannot apply the same kind of strategy that, say, General Petraeus did in Iraq to Afghanistan. They're different.
Sure,
in
they're
many
different,
ways.
but there are some important similarities. You can't just do offensive military operations as though this is a classical battlefield. You've got to win the hearts and minds. You've got to integrate what you do militarily with building up local police and military forces, with bringing on local tribal and social leaders, with economic advance. It's got to be an integrated strategy. To that extent, I actually think there's some important similarities.
We've got to move on to North Korea because that's still another potential flashpoint. North Korea did some testing of missiles again this week. We've had attempts to try to rein North Korea, bring them back on the path of going forward with their nuclear program, dismantling that. Is this brinkmanship? And if it is, because that seems to be a standard technique of the North Koreans, why do we always seem to play along?
Well, because they have nuclear weapons. And you know, there's a lot of blame with the North Koreans. They are incredibly irrational, autarkic, limited from the world. Who knows who's making decisions there, who knows who's in charge, and who knows if there's any rationality. But what's going on right now is that there was a deal. The Bush administration was pretty committed to the deal, but it got greedy. It wanted to have a verification deal with the North Koreans in which they could go anywhere, ask any question at any time. I think that's a great idea. I don't trust the North Koreans as far as I can throw them. At the same time, you want to have a deal. And the White House wanted all of that verification access, and they also didn't want to take them off the terrorism list. So I think Chris Hill went over there. He's the guy who managed to persuade Condi Rice and to persuade the North Koreans that they were serious about moving ahead with this. I think he's close to trying to work it out. His big challenge, I think, is to get President Bush to take them off the terrorism list and to move forward with this. But we were hearing hopeful signs out of Washington.
Richard, 10 seconds or less. Do you think we will take North Korea off the list of state-sponsored terrorists?
The answer is yes. This is a bit of a tactical thing going on between the United States and North Korea. The real question is what happens after that. Unless China plays a central role, no matter what the United States does with its terrorism list, we will not solve the problem of North Korea's nuclear capabilities.
Richard Haass, Carla Robbins, thank you very much for joining us this week on our roundtable, the first of many discussions. Thank you.
Thank you.